Good evening. So already we were talking about the Council of Ministers and the Prime Minister concept from the previous class. And already the many concepts we have discussed. Already many topics we have discussed under this lesson, especially the appointment of Prime Minister and the Council of Ministers, formation of Council of Ministers, then the tenure of the Council of Minister and the Prime Minister also we have discussed in the previous classes. And very important topic of the lesson, so we had talked in the previous classes, so that is the position and the powers of Prime Minister, where in relation to Cabinet, in relation to Council of Minister, in relation to President, coordinating functions, and the emergency position and the powers of Prime Minister. So we have talked in the previous class. Then we also discussed about the two most important topic of the Cabinet, that is collective responsibility and individual responsibility of the Cabinet. We had discussed, especially collective responsibility as a single body, how their functioning should be. So that also we had discussed in the previous class. Then individual role of ministers also we had seen. Okay, so how the moral responsibility of individual personality is represented in the parliament, and which makes the people to decide whether this particular he or she has to be continued for the, in the parliament in their functioning, or after their tenure, whether this particular person is suitable to be re-elected and to give the powers and functions for the another tenure period, where the people can notice the moral responsibility in the individual responsibility of cabinet. So these are all the concepts, or these are all the topics which we had discussed in the previous classes. So today's class we will talk the last topic of the lesson, so that will be distinguish between the cabinet and the council of ministers. Okay, so before I say council of ministers, that what that single body we are having, that single body is classified into three groups. One is first and foremost body, that will be cabinet. Second body will be called as ministers of state. Third will be called as a deputy minister. Okay, together they are called as a council of ministers. If since the syllabus is reduced, so we are not going to study in detail about the cabinet ministers and in detail about the ministers of state, then the deputy ministers. Okay, we are not talking about them. So since we are not talking about these three categories of ministers or three groups of ministers, so what we are having it, but we are just going to discuss in that three categories of ministers to, in that one person we are going to talk, that is cabinet minister, and their difference with the all the council of ministers, that is ministers of state and the deputy ministers of state. So that we are going to see in the today's class, as in the distinction or in the differentiation. Okay, so in that, here I have made two columns. So in that this column completely speaks about the cabinet. Okay, how these cabinet ministers are different from the council of ministers. What are their difference between these two groups of ministers? Okay, so how their functioning will be. So that we are going to see in the distinction. Okay, so we are separately we are going to learn. Okay, so first I will take about the cabinet ministers. Okay, what are this cabinet ministers role? If you see, first and foremost is the cabinet ministers from the inner circle with the council of ministers. So already I said in three categories of minister of this council of minister. Suppose if this is a circle, so in that inner circle we are having, that inner circle is nothing but cabinet ministers, and remaining council of minister, ministers of state, deputy minister, together this circle makes a council of ministers. First and foremost thing you should know, cabinet, the cabinet ministers, they are nothing but they are the inner circle ministers of an council of the inner circle minister of an council of ministers. We call them as a cabinet ministers. This is the first thing you should know. Second thing is all cabinet ministers are a part of council of ministers. Even though they are inner circle, they are part of this council of ministers. Okay, but all council of ministers are not part of cabinet. No, only like all cabinet ministers are a part of council of ministers. Since all cabinet ministers are a part of a council of ministers, so some situation the cabinet ministers can take the responsibility of council of ministers. If they don't function proper, they can take over the functions. But whereas cabinet ministers' functions cannot be taken over by the council of ministers, like ministers of state and the deputy ministers. Okay. The third thing, if you see, okay, this one, if you see, cabinet ministers are consulted on all important matters by the prime minister. Very regularly, there will be a conversation, a communication, and as well as consult by a prime minister, because prime minister itself or prime minister himself one of the cabinet minister. So in the cabinet ministers, the first person is prime minister. After that, only all finance minister, defense minister, home affairs ministers, okay, education, all these things comes. The previous class itself I said list of important cabinet ministers. Okay, so prime minister being one of the cabinet minister, so whatever all the cabinet ministers on the important matter, prime minister when he makes, so he will consult all the cabinet ministers. The next thing, if you see, cabinet meets frequently for formulating the policies. Before the policies frame, before the policies, the bill enters the parliament, regarding that formulating of the policy and the programs, the prime minister will play a very important role in meeting the cabinet ministers. He meets the cabinet ministers, he formulates or he plans the program, then the particular policy will enter into the parliament. Okay, so that is the one of the important concepts, so which we are having it. And next one, if you see, okay, next one, if you see, policy decisions are taken by the cabinet. All the policy, major formulated policy, the weightage to the decision is given by the cabinet ministers. Their decision is weightage. Weight. This is the weight. Cabinet's ministers' weight is the final, which is carried out by the prime minister and remaining council of ministers. Okay, that's the one of the important aspects which we are having. Then the prime minister, cabinet minister, advisors. They can give advice to president on all the matters on the day-to-day governance. They can advise. They have complete right to advise or to give advice to. Cabinet can give advice to president, and even prime minister can give advice to the president on day-to-day activities or governance which is taking place. And the last one, if you see, the cabinet has the power to advise even the president at the time of declaration of emergency, approval of emergency. In the previous class, president lesson, when we talked about the types of emergency. So in that I said, when president proclaims the emergency within 2 months, within 1 month, the emergency should be approved. So that approval should be given. So during that time, the cabinet has the power to advise regarding the declaration of emergency, which is done by an president. Okay, so this is the role of, still there are many role of cabinet, but these are the few important, the part of a cabinet minister, so which we are having it. Okay, that's the one aspect, so which we are having it. So next we are having, that is council of ministers. Okay, council of ministers, when we see, so already I said the council of ministers consists of all three categories of ministers: cabinet, ministers of state, deputy minister. So all these three categories of ministers join together and they make this one called group called council of ministers together, single body. All these three, cabinet, minister of state, deputy ministers, all they come together and they represent a single body. That single body representation we call it as a council of ministers. Okay, and the council of ministers are not consulted by the Prime Minister. Prime Minister will not meet the Council of Ministers. It's very rare. Okay, there won't be the frequent meet with an Council of Minister by an Prime Minister. If necessary, if needed, the Prime Minister may meet or may not. But the Council of Ministers are not consulted by the Prime Minister frequently. Frequent meet between the Council of Minister and Prime Minister will not take place. Then the Council of Minister does not meet a whole on a daily basis. Okay, the cabinet will meet in the daily basis. So every day the cabinet comes together and they meet separately. But whereas Council of Ministers, they will not come as a whole for a daily basis meet. They can have a whole as a daily basis meet only when the Prime Minister or the cabinet ministers, if they invite. Okay, if they invite the Council of Ministers, so they will be joining as a whole for the daily basis or daily meet. Otherwise, no. Especially they should be invited. If they are not invited, they will be, they will be busy with their own activities, whichever they can carry out. Okay, unless and until, especially they are invited, their whole on daily basis, they cannot meet it. That's the one aspect which we are having it. Then Council of Ministers are involved with the policy formulated by the cabinet. After all the policies formulated, planned, and when the particular policies is ready, then that policy is for the discussion to take the opinion of the Council of Ministers. That policy is taken to the Council of Ministers. While framing the policies, while framing the program, they are not taken. After all planning and after preparing the policies, then that policy is taken to the Council of Ministers to give their opinions and the recommendation or ideas. Okay, that's the one aspect which we are having. Then the Council of Ministers cannot advise the President. This is very important. Okay, Council of Ministers, they don't have right to advise the declaration of emergency. Then you may have a question. Now, for example, at the time of emergency, the house is dissolved. Lok Sabha house is dissolved. Okay, Lok Sabha house is dissolved. The cabinet is the one which can approve the emergencies, but nobody is there. Then who can? That time, so Rajya Sabha is the one which advise the Prime Minister, the President, in case of declare of emergency. So that's the one aspect so which we are having it. So Council of Ministers, that is Ministers of State, Deputy Ministers, as of they don't have any rights to advise the President to the declare of emergency. So that's the one aspect so which we are having it. The next one we are having, the cabinet takes over the functions, okay, assigned by the Constitution to the Council of Ministers. Okay, if the proper functioning is not seen, which is given to the Council of Ministers, if cabinet is not happy with the Council of Ministers, functioning according to the Constitution's Act or according to the Constitution saying, whatever the work is assigned to the Council of Ministers, such works the cabinet they can take it and they can have a function. But cabinet's functioning cannot be taken by the Council of Ministers. Okay, that's you just keep in mind. Okay, so these are the distinguish between the cabinet and the Council of Ministers, so which we are having it. So one of very important concept, this is you should know about the cabinet and the Council of Ministers. So that's about the the powers and functions or the Prime Minister and the Council of Ministers concept, so which we are discussing from the previous class onwards. So here we end this particular chapter. The particular chapter is we come to a conclusion. So when I conclude this concept of this two differentiation and distinguish between the Council of Minister and the Cabinet Minister, so we can say that so cabinet becomes the almost like cabinet minister are like institution of an organization to our country. Almost like it's like one institution and organization to our country. Where complete the power, complete role will be played by all formulating the policies and the programs it comes to them. So that way we can say that they are like an institution of organization to our country, so which they are having it. And we can also say they are having separate cabinet also is being given. Okay, they are having separate cabinet which they are having it, and their functioning, their records, and their discussions, decisions, everything will be separately, it will be recorded, okay, in the one particular manner. Okay, that's the one aspect, so which we are having it. So by saying, by having this conclusion, so we'll end up this particular concept of the lesson. So that is the Prime Minister and the Council of Ministers, so which we are having it. So next class, we will move with the, new concept or new lesson, that is judiciary. So in this chapter, the position and the powers of Prime Minister and collective responsibility, individual responsibility, and distinguish between the cabinet and the council minister. These three are very important topics. So once again, you can go through the with the textbook, or you can revise with once the textbook. If you have any doubts, so let me know in the coming classes. Thank you.